Hey, Twisted people, it's your Twisted Woman here, Chauncey K. Robinson, aka Twisted Woman, CKR. And thanks for joining me because today I am talking about American Horror Stories. I feel like I have to always say American Stories because it's not American Horror Story. The spinoff of American Horror Story. And I'm talking about episodes 6 and 7. Also overall, let's just talk about the whole season. I mean, I think Game Over was pretty much the season finale because we have the new season of American Horror Story coming out. So I guess they had to tie this up. There was like a little precursor dessert. But thank you all for joining us. Thank you for those who are joining us in the live chat. The Chuck Taylor is saying first, that's what's up. Thank you. Thanks for joining us live. And for all of you who are joining us in the replay, it's always a pleasure to talk stories with you, particularly horror stories, because that is my jam, given the spooky shirt, because that's, my jam. That's how I do it, y'all. All right. So today I want to talk about Feral. That's the first one we have to talk about. And then we'll talk about Game Over. I feel like I'm going to spend a little bit more time on Game Over because it's more so in connection to the whole season of this show and the universe of American Horror Story. Because it was so meta, you kind of have to talk about those things. But let's talk about Feral because first and foremost, before we get into that, I want to say if you haven't given this video a like yet, please do so. Like, comment, share. Let me know how you're feeling when it comes to American Horror Story. And I want to put this question out to all of you. Hey, Shamar, thanks for joining me in the live chat. I want to put this question out to all of you first and foremost before I talk about it. And I want you to think about it. Have you enjoyed American Horror Stories? Like, what grade would you give the season overall? We have, 7 episodes. What grade would you give this season overall? And do you think we need a season 2? Do you think this should just be kind of a one-off kind of show? Or do you think we need a season 2? Do you think this show, this spinoff, was strong enough to justify its existence? I guess that's my question to you, because I do think that is a question we have to ask about American Horror Stories. But yeah, first and foremost, let's talk about Feral. And we have our lovely couple here. And basically Feral, to me, funny enough, although I'm probably going to spend a little bit more time on Game Over because there's just more things that I need to dissect when it comes to Game Over. I would say Feral was pretty much neck and neck for being probably one of the better, if not one of the best episodes of this show, of this season. And let me explain why I think that is. I'm going to give it a solid A. I give Feral a solid A in terms of a great, succinct horror story, which is what we badly needed for this show. And I'm not going to get into some of the other ones. We had a few that were okay. Like Drive-In was okay. But then again, if you've seen my stream on that, it was okay. But that was because the first 2 episodes, Rubber Woman, was just so subpar. So the bar was low. And then Naughty List was all right, but it was kind of silly. And then I thought Baal was better. It was getting there in terms of lore, in terms of a full story that you can kind of immerse yourself in, see where it's going. And I feel like with this one, Feral, it was succinct. It was like, whoa, this is a horror story. There are jumps. There are solid scares. There is lore. They created their own lore. I love when horror kind of takes things that we already know about and kind of twist it to be its own sort of thing, whether it's something mundane like, the Great Forest. I love the forest. I go to Yosemite and things like that. So it was cool to see this connected to this. And then the whole idea of the park rangers, right? And what they really do. I was like, yes, that's what we should be doing. Something inventive, something you wouldn't necessarily be thinking off the top of your head. And I love that they did that. The whole thing of the Feral, well, that was the whole story of the Bigfoot, but it's not really Bigfoot. I love when stories do things like that because someone sat down and was like, let's think about this, right? And that's what I really, first and foremost, that's why Feral got such a more of a bigger plus for me, because I felt like some of the other episodes we had played on a lot of pop culture stuff, which was like, yeah, okay, YouTube, TikTok, sure, with Naughty List, and then like the whole idea of I thought Drive-In was a little bit more inventive. Although that gimmick has been played before of a movie that affects the people, but I appreciated that. But I felt like this one actually like created some new lore, something. And I mean, the scares were actually on point. I was like, wow, I am actually like, this feels like a mini horror movie, which I can't say that for the other ones when it comes to it. But let's see what all of you are saying in the chat. Shamara is saying, I'd unfortunately have to give it a C- in terms of the overall season. I was expecting so much more, but everything seemed watered down with the exception of 2 or 3 episodes. And I agree with you, Shamar. That's exactly how I felt about this. I'm like, you got 7 episodes, right? And I'm sure you got a lot of scripts because a lot of people want to write. I mean, a lot of writers are going to want to, sink their teeth into writing for a show, an anthology series. Why not, right? And I'm like, these were the scripts you picked. You know what I mean? Like these were the scripts. This was top notch for, in your opinion, for like the first season of the show. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know about that, because I feel like you got to kind of wow people with the first season usually, because especially when it's a spinoff from a show that has such a passionate fan base that will tell you what they think when it comes to what Ryan Murphy and stuff does. So it was kind of like these were the scripts. Yeah. Chuck Taylor is saying, I really enjoyed Pharaoh. Gave me them throwback tales from the Crypt vibes. Exactly, especially the ending. Yeah, let's talk about the ending in a second here. This is what's so funny about it, and maybe seeing what Chuck Taylor said. I don't know if y'all agree with me or not. I didn't care for the ending. I thought it was, I kind of knew the boy. I thought it was a little predictable. I kind of knew the little boy was going to be something to these people. I didn't think they had killed him. I didn't think they had eaten the little boy. And the little boy, the little taller boy was so cute. That was good casting in terms of how innocent he looked. So the contrast of what he turned into was such a contrast. I'm kind of sad almost too. I like that. I liked where the story went. I liked the lore. I would have really enjoyed to have the park ranger played by, I think Cody Fernand's name, a little bit longer, in there, the kind of, the role he played in the narrative and things like that. I like the twists and turns that we got, them getting taken out there, their guide kind of having a whole thing of killing. There was like a lot of twists and turns. And I agree with you, Chuck, that there was kind of that Tales from the Crypt sort of like, not everyone's a good person, but people get their comeuppance in terms of, what is due to them. And because of that, and this is kind of my issue with somewhat the majority of this show, where there's really, aside from Baal, where I thought twisted the narrative to give empowerment to who usually in a story like that, the woman who's dealing with the pregnancy usually loses, she got to be empowered. That totally turned the script on its head, because usually like with Rosemary's Baby and things like that, we don't usually get that sort of thing. So I love that they subverted that trope. I didn't feel like they did the same thing with Pharaoh. I felt like, I'm not saying I needed the parents to live, but I'm kind of like, I don't know. It was kind of like, why not, they have to live among them or something like that. Something that just kind of wasn't like, oh, dinner. And it was like, okay. And that was it. I was like, all right, it was, yeah. And then that was it. And I was like, we could have gotten a lot more when it comes to the Pharaoh culture and who these people are and what parks are they in, things like that. Are other people dealing with pharaohs? Are there some pharaohs who don't want to be hostile? There was a lot to dive into. And I feel like almost it was a missed opportunity, because American Horror Story is a little bit full of itself, right? The Horror Stories universe is full of itself. And so it made it so we had to go back to Murder House, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So I didn't love the ending of this episode, because I thought it was a little bit, I thought it was, for lack of a better word, overkill. I thought the parents went through enough. And that's the issue with this show sometimes, where characters that are crappy sometimes end up getting the better ending than the characters who actually sort of deserve it. And I know some of you might think, well, it's just showing that's the way the world can be. But I'd like to be a little bit more optimistic with my horror. But let me know what you all think of that. Do you agree with me that at times karma is not served appropriately in the American horror stories universe. Come again. Thanks for joining us. Is saying I was disappointed in the series as a whole. Yeah, and I feel that because I was too. I was expecting a lot more. I was expecting some scripts to really blow me away because you only had an episode, right? And that's not what we got. Solomon, thanks for joining us. Is saying I'd give the season a solid 4/10. Yeah, it's kind of low. Only 3 out of 7 episodes were objectively good, in my opinion, and I agree with you, Solomon. I honestly, my top one, honestly, probably is Feral. In terms of like real scares and real like stakes, and not devolving into silliness. And then Naughty List was okay, and Drive-In was okay. Baal was probably tied. Baal is tied for me. If y'all had to rank it, I want to know, let me know in the chat and also in the replay, for those of you joining on the replay. If you had to pick your favorite episode of the season, what would it be? Of this season, what's your favorite episode? I think I'm tied for Feral and Baal for different reasons. Chuck Taylor saying give the series a 6 out of 10, 6/10. Shamar is saying Feral was really good. I was genuinely surprised. Exactly. I thought it made some choices, and I love the folklore. I was like, whoa, they really created their own lore out of something like Bigfoot. And I was like, wow, that was good. Solomon saying, I'm glad it's getting another season. I love anthology horror, and I optimistically hope it gets better. Yeah. And and I asked that question earlier. Do y'all, it's getting another season. Do y'all want it to have another season? Do you think this is adding anything to the American Horror Stories universe? Do you think this is adding anything to the horror genre in the sense of stories that need to be told? Because like many of you are saying, this was like a C kind of season for me. I wrote it in my notes. I gave this overall season a C. And I was like, for a first season, I would have hoped that they had picked the top-notch scripts, and I don't think they did. And I don't know why they did that. I don't know. I feel like they almost held back, because I know there's writers out there, y'all, who are probably writing some boss-type plot lines that would fit into an American Horror Story universe kind of way about things. And I don't know. I feel like they didn't pick the best ones they could have, Chuck Taylor is saying Baal and Feral were your top, and I agree with you. Like mine, those were my top ones. The runner up was probably Naughty List and maybe Drive-In, but I don't know. This season had a lot of weak points for only having 7 episodes, because you only got 7 episodes. Not like you got to have 20, so you don't have a lot of time to have so episodes, because there's but so many episodes. So for me, I'm like, Shamara saying I'd love for it to get another season if they actually dive into different supernatural creatures and cohesive stories. But if not, I won't be interested. I agree with you, Shamara. So in terms of Feral, like I was saying, my overall grade for Feral, the episode's A. It's top. It's one of the top ones of this season. I honestly think they should have started the season with Feral. I think they would have had a better punch with just what we were going to be in store for, with the parents getting eaten at the end and stuff. I didn't particularly like the ending, because I didn't think the parents needed to be eaten to prove the point that the child was like on some other stuff now. But then, like I said, maybe that's just my optimism. Let me know in the chat and also in the replay, y'all, if y'all agree with that. And, but it was one of the better ones. There were some genuine scares. I love the idea of the cannibal people. We don't know where they're from. So I love that the episode didn't try to give us all the answers. It was like, well, we don't know where these people are from. They could be the people who lost the Civil War, who never wanted to go back into normal life. Could just be people who never decided to join, or people who just checked out and went into the forest, right? And I love when stuff is connected to real world things, because I don't know about y'all, being in California, I go on hikes. That's kind of one of the things you do here. You hike. And usually I see a sign of like mountain lion beware and stuff like that. So, it's cool. And I've gone camping, so it's cool to kind of have this thing that kind of tingles in the back of your head. Like, okay, are there ferals out here? Is this being pulled from something else? What if Bigfoot wasn't really like the missing link, as they try to always claim? And what if it was just people out in the forest who just let their hair grow in all places and they're just kind of there, you know. Although I think there are more dangerous things in the world with just regular humans. But I love the fact that it plays on what you can actually, it sticks with you. It was a story that can stick with you because if you are connected to stuff, you could, you know, go out in the world and be like, what if, you know? And that's not kind of how the other stories played out. The other stories were kind of like, okay, this is nothing to do with me. You know what I mean? And there's nothing really connected to. So it lacked that real scary feeling. But most people have gone to a woods or a park or something. So I love when horror really plays onto that. Chuck Taylor is saying, to be honest, I do not think this show was created for annual American Horror Story viewers. Seems like this show was meant to be a put on. Yeah. You know, and that was my issue. That was kind of my issue. When you say put on, Chuck Taylor, do you mean annual, like a regular viewer, or do you mean like a new person? You're saying, for example, the first 2 episodes of the season was simply an expedited version of Murder House. That's true. Solomon is saying, I think Pharaoh had a pointless twist ending, right? Scarlett and Ruby got multiple happy endings, but suffering parents couldn't. It bummed me out. Exactly. And thank you, Solomon. This is exactly what I was saying. This is my issue with the American Horror Story universe sometimes, but more so, not even that. It goes beyond this. This actually, I'm going to do a deep cut and talk about Glee a little bit for those of you who watched the other Ryan Murphy show, Glee, that put him on the map a bit, where he has a tendency, and I don't know if it was just because this was a different writer. I don't know if it's just a tendency that writers are trying to, you know, play into what they think he would be into or whatever. They have a tendency to make it so the most horrible people get happy endings, or the people who don't need to be the ones that get the really happy endings always end up not getting the karma that they deserve over the crap they pulled. And somehow there's some weird writing that isn't usually earned that makes it seem like you should be rooting for the horrible person. And it's like, you haven't earned that. Like, the writing doesn't earn me to root for Rachel Berry in Glee, or, you know, Scarlett and Ruby in this particular case in American Horror Stories. And yet that was the love story throughout the whole season of this show and of this particular season. I was like, you didn't earn that. There's nothing making me want to root for this couple, especially not Scarlett. She didn't give a crap about her dads, who really genuinely loved her. And she's a killer, you know, and not even like a good killer, you know, like she's like, oh, you know, like a Robin Hood type killer. I kill the bad people and not the innocents. She totally kills the innocents. So I'm like, why should I care about this person's story, and why are they continuing to revisit it? You know, and I agree with you, Solomon. That was why I was like, these suffering parents went through like 10 years of this or so, and like, they don't get the happy ending. They get eaten in the forest, yet I'm supposed to be happy that true love never dies for Ruby and Scarlett. Like, what? Like, I don't know. It just didn't put a good feeling. And I was like, that's kind of like you said, a bummer, because the episode was really solid and tight up to that moment. They had reconnected. You kind of realized that they still loved each other. They were kind of picking up the pieces. And then their kid chooses to just kill them and not let them go. He could have just been like, you got to go, but I can't go with you, kind of a deal. We could have had a sad ending, but kind of like, you know, thanks, son, we'll move on and have another kid or something. You know what I mean? If they wanted to. And I just didn't understand what was the point of that. And like you said, Solomon, I agree. I just thought it was a little pointless that they had it so the parents had to also die at the end. It was like they did all of that, survived all of that just to be killed by their son. And I get it. You know, some people are edgelord meaning edgy for the sake of being edgy. So it's kind of like, well, yeah, that's just how life is. And I'm like, I don't watch movies to be real. I can watch the news for stuff like that. You know, you're supposed to give me a little bit of hope in my stories, a little bit of a fighting chance. Can't just be bleak, because why would you sit through that? But that's another debate, as I've had debates before regarding whether horror should be nihilistic or not. Chuck Taylor saying, like to gain new viewers for the main series. Yeah. I agree with you a little bit with that, Chuck Taylor, that maybe this show is a way to get viewers to pay attention to American Horror Story, the regular season, to bring in new people. You know, that could be a thing. But I don't know if it does that job, because if I just went by this season alone, I probably wouldn't tune into the American Horror Story seasons. I'd be like, this is it. This is what it is. I'm sitting through a whole, not just one episode of this kind of stuff, a whole season of it. I don't know. I don't know if it would do its job. Chuck Taylor saying, I thought the ending of Pharaoh was comedic. I don't know. I didn't feel like it was comedic. I mean, I like that he called them dinner. That was cool. Like, who are these people? Dinner. But it was like, maybe he could have called them dinner and they still would have been able to get out. Like, maybe a copter comes, and they still like, okay, their son was trying to eat them. We'll leave. He could have did that and they could have still survived somehow. But it was just like, yeah, no, they're just going to die. And I'm like, oh, what is that? You had such a great kind of setup and you just didn't land the ending. So that's kind of my thought process on that. But yeah, overall, Pharaoh definitely came in at the what do you call it, the halftime mark or whatever, and kind of stole the season a little bit. Pharaoh and Baal were probably the top one. But let me know, y'all, in the chat and the replay what y'all think. But we've been talking about it a little bit, but let's move on to Game Over, because we got to talk about Game Over. Wow. Okay. So first and foremost, before I even get into it, I want to know what did y'all think of? What did y'all think of? I got to put Scarlett up here because, or is her name Ruth? Which one was she? I don't know. It was just so interconnected. I can't even remember which one she was. But Game Over. Yeah. Man, give me a second with this. What was this? What was Game Over, y'all? Like, let me know what y'all thought of Game Over, because I don't know what that was. You ever see something where someone's trying to be so smart and witty, so smart and witty, and they don't have the range? That's how I felt about Game Over. I was like, okay, so this was a very meta episode, right? Shamara is saying, I have so many thoughts about Game Over. Yes, right? Chuck Taylor's like, now that episode was terrible. Yeah, so Game Over was super meta, right? What we got was a lot of fake outs. There was a lot of fake outs in Game Over. And it was this play on being very audience aware, which can work sometimes. I'm not against meta. Sometimes meta can be great. Sometimes it can work. Chuck Taylor is saying the highlight of the episode was the brought to you by Candyman commercial before it aired. Yeah, that's pretty much was the highlight. Shamara is saying, I was so disappointed. The episode was mad throughout, but the second twist made the episode a waste of time. And let's talk about that, right? Y'all, I got so many questions about Game Over because I don't know what happened. I don't know what it affected. I don't know what it was actually really connected to, because first you think, okay, this is really happening. We had Miley Cyrus's little sister up in there. I was looking, I was like, who is this? She looks like someone. It was like Miley Cyrus's little sister, which was very cool. She did a great job. I actually liked the couple in the beginning. I thought it was kind of I thought it was a little bit of a little dig at horror fans. The whole thing met at a horror convention. I want to sleep in a house that has murder victims in it. I don't know about y'all, but that's not the kind of stuff I like to do. I do like to go on ghost tours. Like, I've gone to New Orleans. I've gone on ghost tours. I like stuff that has ghost lore and like supernatural lore and like historic things. Like when I was in Pennsylvania, I visited the place where supposedly the guy who wrote Dracula, Bram Stoker, stayed before he came up with Dracula and stuff, and things like that. Really cool history. People stealing bodies in a park in Pennsylvania and things. I like stuff that has history. I'm not those kind of people that want to sleep in houses where people got murdered at and stuff, though. But I know there are people like that, and no shade if you are. But I did kind of dig that there was a little bit of a kind of a little joke on them kind of a thing. Like, yeah, people like this exist, and don't they seem kind of ridiculous wanting to do stuff like that, right? Y'all, it's my mama. Say hi to my mama. Hey, you. Hey, ma. That's my mom. I love her. Thanks for joining us, lady. Love you. Bannon, thanks for joining us, Bannon, and saying meta can work only when it's done right. And I agree with you. This episode was very meta, but it wasn't earned. I don't think you can, first of all, I don't think you can really do meta in the first season of a show. Especially with the same characters that we just met like 5 episodes ago. I don't think that's earned, because if those are the majority of the characters, I haven't spent enough time with them to care about their meta. Although I did appreciate that we did see some other, characters from the first season Murder House, right? But my question, and I want to know what you guys think, was it all a video game? Or do you think maybe the woman who made the video game was in her own version of heaven? Maybe she did move on, and she moved on into her own version of heaven where her son is proud of her. They're living together. They're going out. She achieved what she wanted to achieve. That was one of my thoughts when I saw the twist ending, that maybe it wasn't, maybe it was real, and that the mother actually just went to her own version of heaven, which was just like doing things right by her son. But then I was like, okay, I'm probably giving them too much credit, right? Because I sat through this episode. I think I'm giving them too much credit that this was, her heaven, because I don't think they're that subtle. So I did think, okay, no, this really was all in the video game. And when I realized it was all in the video game, I was like, this is horrible. Because then what use does the ball what use does the ball work? The ball from the guy. I'm like, okay, if it was her heaven, then that would just mean that the latex dude is just in her heaven. So it has to be that it really is a video game in the real world, and that latex guy might have gotten out of the video game, because she didn't get out of the actual house, because the actual house wasn't in play in this whole episode, right? And tell me if I'm wrong, y'all, but did they ever establish that American Horror Stories was a show within a show before? Or was this the first time they were pulling that? Because I'm like, if you didn't do that in any other season of this show, I don't really know if you should do that in the first season of its spinoff, right? It had some moments. I'll give it that. When the first twist happened, I liked that. The first twist of it being a video game, the first one, I actually thought, okay, that's kind of cool, because she's going to end up going to Murder House. And I kind of liked where that was going. I even liked it up to the point of the burn of the house happening, because I thought to myself, if y'all saw my first stream of this, where I was talking about American Horror Stories, and I was saying that I didn't know why they started this spinoff with Murder House references, because I thought I even said, I was like, this is going to be hard for someone who is new to the show to get into, because this first 2 episodes is so heavy on what you would already have known from the first season of American Horror Story, which probably talks to what Chuck Taylor was talking about, of perhaps it's not necessarily, but maybe it is for new or old viewers. And I just felt like, okay, I'm tired of Murder House. Why is this the first 2 episodes of an anthology series? It's supposed to be a whole new type of thing. So I kind of felt like I was the young boy when he said, I am tired of Murder House. We've been to Murder House enough, So I understood that meta, because I was like, yes, I feel that too. We are tired of Murder House. I was actually wondering why we went to Murder House in the first 2 episodes of this series. So I got that. So I thought it was actually, so with that, I was like, okay, it's doing what it's supposed to do. But then I realized no, it's not, because the next twist happened. And suddenly it all was the video game. And somehow I'm supposed to care that Ruby and Scarlet, who are horrible people, Ruby and Scarlet are horrible characters on a number of levels, in terms of their morality and everything like that, but also just the way they're written. They are horrible characters. And I'm supposed to care that they end up together again in a condominium or whatever. I don't know. And I just thought, what was the point? What was this? What was the point of this episode? And I said C-, but I really probably should have given it a D. I was being nice because I liked the first half of it. And I thought it had some emotional weight of some of the ghosts and stuff wanting to leave, and how it would feel living in a house that you can only leave once a year, and your life doesn't move on. And it's just kind of, this is where you are. And so I liked some aspects of it, and I thought it was a good idea. I just thought the execution was horrible, you know. Bannon is saying, oh, I'm doing hard just for you, Chauncey, showing you some love. Thank you. It's always appreciated, Bannon. Let's see what some of y'all. Bannon saying, hey, Ma, if you're still watching, Bannon saying that they love you. Yeah, Malusi. Hey, Malusi, thanks for joining us. Howdy. Shamar is saying, had the episode ended with the murder house being burned down, I would have been like, all right, at least we won't revisit there again. Exactly. That's what I thought too. I was like, yes, they understood. Maybe they knew that we would be annoyed that the first 2 episodes of this show was murder house. And so they're speaking to the fact, and let's be real, I do believe in multiple seasons of American Horror Story, they have revisited Murder House, right? This isn't the first time we've revisited season 1 Murder House. So maybe it was like meta of people knowing, okay, we get it, y'all. Y'all don't like murder. We keep going back to it. This is our way of finally ending Murder House. But now I'm confused because I'm like, well, was Murder House burned down if it was all a video game? Because maybe it wasn't burned down. So does that mean we still have to deal with Murder House? Like, we went through all of that and we still have to deal with Murder House existing? Or was Murder House really done? Because I didn't even understand the dialogue with the mother and the son, because the son was like, do you think that ghosts will leave Murder House and somehow be able to get out or whatever? And the mother was like, I hope not. But I'm like, okay, but how can you speak that way if Murder House is still standing? Because none of that really happened. So why are you worried about them getting out? How would that even be possible? It was just so convoluted. Stuff didn't make sense. And they didn't truly establish what was real and what wasn't, you know? Chuck Taylor is saying it was like greatest hit compilation in 1 episode in a way, but it wasn't even greatest hits, was it? Because it was like, there wasn't really like highlighted stuff going on. And American Horror Story already did this, right? With all the crossovers. I think it was, the season called The End, or, you know, Apocalypse. I think it was American Horror Story Apocalypse, right? Where there was a whole bunch of like a convergence of a lot of other universes and stuff. So we did this already. We had the crossovers and stuff. Shamara is saying, I think this is the first time they've pulled that. Okay. Vera is saying, thanks for joining us in the chat. Vera is saying, American Horror Story is great at beating a dead horse and ruining some of its best stories. Leave Murder House alone. Apocalypse was enough. Exactly. Karen, my mom, is saying, love you too, guys too. And she's saying, you make me want to see this. You don't want to see this, Mom. I don't think. Let her know in the chat, y'all. We don't think you'd like this one, Ma. But that gives me an idea to let you all know, if you are watching Evil, a really great show that is knocking it out of the park when it comes to the scares and the story and the writing, be sure to join me and my mama next week, as we are going to be talking about Evil. We're jumping in at season 2 in the latest episode. So if y'all are watching Evil, do be sure to check that out and join us for that. Because me and my mama, yes, Vera, Evil is awesome. Oh my gosh, I love Evil. It's writing done right. It's horror done right. We're diving into the rest of the season of Evil. So please do join us for that, y'all, because it's always a pleasure talking these stories with you, and stories that we don't always have to be complaining about, because I don't hate watch shows. I actually am still watching this because I did like some aspects of it. So I'm not a hate watcher, y'all. I'm not that kind of person. I watch it. If I get to a point where I really hate a show, I stop looking at it. I will stop reviewing it. I'm not going to do that, because what's the point, right? So I have hope for this show. I even have hope for a season 2. But they got to do better. They got to pick better scripts, y'all. Also, if y'all are feeling, donating or whatever, super chat, show some love, or, a particular question, I can do that for you. And if you haven't already, please do give this video a like, and share it, and let us know what y'all are thinking. So no, I really don't like it. I like it, Ma, but I don't love it. And I think there was some good stuff, but most of it was not. Okay. So Solomon is saying, I wish American Horror Story would stop using Murder House, because they can't even get their own lore right. And a house full of established ghosts, and all we see is Ruby, Paris Jackson, and a bunch of random others. Something tells me tells me they couldn't get some of those actors that like want to show up for just a one-off. Some of them did because they love Ryan Murphy. They love, Ian and all of them. So they're friends. So they showed up. We got Matt Bomer and stuff like that. But I think for some people, they were just like, no, we're not showing. So I think they just had to create new characters for this particularly. And I get you, Solomon, because my thing is, if you had to create new characters for it and couldn't even use the ones that are established, why are we watching this? Why do it? Why do it and put so much emphasis on it? I think that's more of the issue. I wouldn't have minded a one-off episode of Murder House with a new set. Sure. The issue was we started the season with them, and it was probably, I'm going to be real with y'all, Rubber Woman episode 1 and 2 was, to me, the weakest episodes of this season, right? And I said that when I started the live shows of this show, of this season. And I just thought to myself, oh my gosh, it was the weakest of the season and we're still going to revisit it. Like that was your weakest ones. And I have to sit through not 2 episodes of it because they gave a part 1, part 2. I have to now sit through a third of it. Come on. It was too much. Ruby and Scarlett weren't endearing enough for me to be rooting for them. So what is this, Thank you, Bannon, for that. Yeah, I couldn't. It was so muddled, y'all. I got so many questions, but I don't even know if the questions matter because I don't think this is going to do anything. I guess the one hope we can say is that maybe season 2 of this anthology series won't have Murder House in it. I think that's what we can hope for with this, that they'll just be done. But with that red ball, I think we're going to have to keep seeing the latex guy. And I'm just like, and that just became such a gimmick, the whole latex thing. I was just like, at one point that was creepy, but now it's just kind of gimmicky. And now you're overdoing it. And it's not even, it has no punch to it. And I just think this character that I have up here, if you are watching, is probably one of the worst characters that the American Horror Stories universe has created. And yet I'm supposed to care about this character. I don't know why. I hope we don't revisit. I hope we're done with this character. Honestly, y'all. I hope we're done with Ruby and Scarlett. I hope we're done with Murder House because this wasn't it, y'all. This really wasn't it. Vera saying there's so much they can do without touching any old stories. I agree. And that's what I had hoped they would do. I understood. I'm like, you're going to have at least one reference point because this is American Horror Story. So you want to throw in a little fan service for the people who watch the main show. I get it. I just didn't understand why we stayed there. I mean, if you want to give us something new, I mean, think about it. If you're a person who has watched American Horror Story, the seasons, you know this stuff. You don't want to rehash, especially with what you might consider bargain basement type characters that aren't even the ones you were used to from the main show. And if you're a new person, you're thinking, okay, who are these people? Why are we still here? This latex suit isn't all that interesting. Why is this such a thing? Why is it such a thing? So I don't think they pleased either of the kind of audience that they could both draw in. I thought it was an opportunity loss. So my overall grade, y'all, for season 1 of American Horror Stories is a C. And honestly, what gave it the C was the better shows because without Farrell, Bow Ow, y'all, help me out, y'all. Y'all know what that episode was. Bow, my Jersey butt. I'm saying Bow, and Drive-In and Naughty List were okay. There were only 2 that were real standouts. So, in my opinion, those are the only ones that were able to give it a C. If it was on Rubber Woman 1 and 2 alone and minus Farrell and Bayal, and if it was just that, I would give this first season a D. I would. Those episodes saved it from being a show that I would not recommend to anyone. With those episodes, I could recommend this to someone saying, if you like horror in general, you will probably enjoy this to some degree because you like horror. But if you're not a horror fan and you're not someone who is actually a fan of American Horror Story universe, I don't think this is a show for you. But let me know, y'all. Do y'all agree with me on that one? Do you agree with my review and assessment? I think anyone outside of this isn't going to be drawn in by this show alone. I would actually recommend them watch American Horror Story 1984 or even Murder House. Maybe just watch the first season of that if they really wanted to know what they could be getting into with this universe, but definitely not the stories itself. But I do have hope for season 2. So I will, God willing, try to review it. So we'll see. But I thought it was, they tried. Yeah, my mom is saying American Horror Story. I used to watch it when it came on Channel 5 here. Yeah. Chuck Terry said, LOL, laugh out loud. I thought the episode was called Bilal. All right. By Al. Yeah, right. Whatever. It was actually one of the better ones, right? Either way, name and all. Actually, if y'all want to know my live stream of that one, I actually did talk about the name of that demon or short god or whatever, depending on your perspective a little bit. So I did give it respect when I was talking about it. It's hard to pronounce sometimes. But yeah, that's my overall thoughts. I think this was a weak season, y'all. I am excited for double feature. For those of you who will be watching American Horror Story season 10 double feature, I will be I will be reviewing that. So I'm gonna check that out. Hey, maybe I'll even rope my mom into watching that one with me. Although, y'all, I think American Horror Story might not be her cup of tea with some of the stuff they do, but I might rope her in to do that one with me as well. But double feature deals with aliens and mer people, it looks like. So I think that's going to be good. Maybe all the writing effort went to that season and we just got the scraps with American Horror Stories. It's kind of what I'm thinking, y'all. But thank you all so much for joining me as I talked about this season and these episodes. And yeah, we'll see where it goes, but I'm going to stick with the American Horror Story universe so far. I wasn't really feeling this season at all, but thank you all again for joining me. Give this video a like if you haven't already. And also, even if you've been in the chat, let me know in the comment section, your overall thoughts. Like if you had to rank this season, how would you rank it? What was your best? What was the worst? And why? Let me know in the comments down below. Diane, thanks for joining us. Diane is saying, yes, Val was decent. But this season was just horrible overall, disappointing. And that's what we've been saying. It was a disappointing season. And I know they can do better because I loved American Horror Story 1984. And that was one of the later seasons, right? That was the latest season. So it was kind of like they still have it in them to do good storytelling for this universe. So I don't know what happened with the scripts they picked this one, but it wasn't very good. But yeah, let me know, y'all. Comment down below if you are still around and you want to do another live with me and you are watching Titans on HBO Max. Stick around in a little bit if you're in the live, as I will be doing episodes 1 through 4 talking about Titans DC universe for those of you who are watching. Yeah, thanks so much, everyone, and have a good rest of your weekend. Enjoy this Sunday. Stay safe out there in these times, and thank you again for being here.